Every police officer has that one call, the one they never forget, not because it was violent, not because it made the news, but because years later, when they're lying awake in bed staring at the ceiling, they still can't explain what happened. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true police stories shared by officers who experienced things that never made sense. A veteran K9 handler encounters something inside an empty house that makes his fearless German Shepherd refuse to enter a room. A rookie officer responds to what seems like a strange prank call during a thunderstorm and discovers a nightmare hidden beneath an abandoned home. And a late-night scream leads police into a quiet suburban house where blood covers the floor. But the victim is nowhere to be found. These aren't urban legends. These aren't ghost stories. These are real experiences from real police officers. And by the end of the last story, you'll understand why some calls never leave an officer's mind. Turn off the lights, lock your doors, and let's begin. I've been a K9 handler for almost 9 years. During that time, I've trusted one partner more than anyone else I've ever worked with. A 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rex. Rex wasn't just a police dog. He was family. He was trained in tracking, suspect apprehension, narcotics detection, and building searches. We'd spent years working together, long enough that I could usually tell what he was thinking just by looking at him. More importantly, I trusted his instincts. If Rex was calm, I was calm. If Rex sensed danger, I paid attention. Because unlike people, dogs don't lie. And that is exactly why what happened that night still bothers me. It started with what should have been a routine search. Patrol officers had attempted to stop a suspect several blocks away from a quiet residential neighborhood. The guy immediately ran. What followed was a foot pursuit through backyards, fences, and side streets. Officers chased him for several minutes before losing sight of him near a 2-story house at the end of a subdivision. When they searched the area, they discovered something concerning. A side gate leading into the backyard was open. Even stranger, the back door of the home was unlocked. Neighbors reported hearing what sounded like a struggle shortly before officers arrived. Nobody knew whether the suspect had entered the house, but nobody could rule it out either. Patrol cleared the first floor. They didn't find anyone. Still, they weren't comfortable declaring the house safe. That is when they called me. Rex and I arrived roughly 20 minutes later. The neighborhood was quiet, almost unnaturally quiet. No barking dogs, no televisions, no people outside. Just a dark suburban street illuminated by the occasional porch light. The homeowners were reportedly out of town. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been inside, but suspects don't always leave evidence. Sometimes they just hide. One of the officers briefed me quickly. The suspect had vanished within yards of the property. Nobody had seen him leave. Nobody had found him. Which meant there was still a chance he was inside. I clipped Rex onto a short leash. He immediately shifted into work mode. Ears forward, eyes alert, focused. I gave him the search command. Without hesitation, he pulled forward. We entered through the rear of the house. The first floor was exactly what you'd expect from a family home: living room, kitchen, laundry room, dining area. Everything looked normal. Nothing was overturned. Nothing appeared disturbed. The air inside felt stale, like the house had been sitting empty for days. Room by room, we searched. Living room, clear. Kitchen, clear. Laundry room, clear. No sign of the suspect. Eventually, we reached the staircase. I remember thinking that if someone was hiding, the second floor was the most likely place. Rex led the way upstairs. The hallway at the top was narrow. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Every door stood partially open. The air felt different up there, still, heavy. All the windows were closed. There wasn't even the slightest draft. I checked the first bedroom, empty. Second bedroom, empty. Then Rex suddenly turned toward the bathroom at the end of the hall. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He entered the bathroom and began sniffing around. The edge of the vanity, the corners, the floor. I stood behind him, scanning the room. Everything looked perfectly normal. Then Rex froze. Completely froze. Every muscle in his body locked up, his ears shot forward. The hair along his back slowly began to rise. And then came the growl, low, deep. The kind of growl that vibrates through a dog's chest. I'd heard him growl before, usually when he'd located a hiding suspect, but this sounded different. This sounded wrong. "What is it, buddy?" I whispered. The growling intensified. Then suddenly he started barking, not at the bathroom, not at the vanity, not at the shower, at the hallway. I slowly backed out of the bathroom beside him. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I saw what he was looking at. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I realized it was standing there. A figure, tall, dark, motionless, standing near the doorway of the last bedroom. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I stared at it. It stared back. At least that is what it felt like. The hallway was dimly lit by the beam of my flashlight, yet somehow I couldn't make out any facial features. No clothing, no details. Just a dark human-shaped silhouette. My first thought was that it had to be another officer, but I immediately dismissed that idea. I knew every officer working the scene. None of them were upstairs, and none of them would silently stand there without identifying themselves. I raised my voice. "Police K9, show me your hands." No response. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. The silence felt suffocating. "Who is that?" I shouted. Still nothing. Beside me, Rex continued barking. Then something happened I'd never seen before. He began backing away. Actually backing away. Rex had tracked armed suspects. He'd entered dangerous buildings. He'd confronted violent criminals. But now he was trying to retreat. Every instinct in his body seemed to be telling him to leave, and that terrified me more than the figure itself. Then the figure moved, slowly, calmly. Without making a sound, it turned, walked toward the final bedroom, and disappeared inside. My pulse immediately spiked. If that was our suspect, there was nowhere for him to go. That room was a dead end. No balcony, no second exit, no staircase, nothing. I drew my weapon. Over the radio, I said, "Possible suspect upstairs, end bedroom. Start making your way up." Then I stepped forward. Rex planted all four paws. The leash went tight. He refused to move. I pulled harder, nothing. He looked up at me. And I swear to this day, he looked scared. Not aggressive, not confused, scared. Like he knew something I didn't. I finally managed to pull him down the hallway. Every step felt wrong. The closer we got to that bedroom, the more desperate Rex became to stop. When we reached the doorway, he refused to cross it, completely refused. I couldn't force him, so I entered alone, weapon raised, heart pounding, ready for a confrontation. The room was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. A bed against one wall. A dresser across from it. Nothing else. No suspect, no movement, no sounds, no hiding places. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I opened the closet. Nothing. The window was closed and locked. There was no attic hatch. No crawl space, no hidden door. Nothing. A few seconds later, the other officers arrived upstairs. Together, we searched every inch of that room, every wall, every corner, every possible hiding place. Nothing. The suspect had vanished. But what bothered everyone wasn't the empty room. It was Rex. Even after the search was over, he refused to enter. One officer crouched down and tried calling him inside. Rex wouldn't budge. Another officer tried. Same result. The dog wouldn't cross the threshold, not for anyone. For nearly 20 minutes we searched. Found nothing. Eventually I decided to take Rex outside. As we walked away, he kept looking back toward that bedroom, back toward the doorway, as if something was still standing there. The moment we stepped outside into the night air, he relaxed. Not completely, but enough that I noticed the difference immediately. When I put him in his crate, he curled up without hesitation. Normally, after a successful search, he'd stare at me through the bars, waiting for praise. That night he didn't. He simply lay down. Quiet. Patrol eventually wrapped up the scene. The suspect was never found, and I've spent years replaying that night in my head. Maybe it really was the suspect. Maybe he somehow escaped. Maybe there was something we overlooked. I don't know. What I do know is this. I've searched hundreds of buildings with Rex. Warehouses, drug houses, abandoned structures, wooded areas in the middle of the night. I've seen him charge directly toward armed suspects without hesitation, but whatever was inside that room, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. And the strangest part, in all the years since, he has never reacted that way again. Not once. When I was 21 years old, I joined the police force in a small town that I'd rather not name. At the time, I was a young father trying to support my family. The department needed officers. I needed a paycheck. The timing worked out perfectly. Because I was new, I got assigned to the shift nobody wanted, nights. 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Most rookies hated it. I didn't. I've always been a night owl. Most shifts were uneventful anyway. A speeding ticket here. A drunk driver there. The occasional domestic dispute. The occasional alarm call. The rest of the time I'd sit in my cruiser listening to podcasts while driving through empty streets. In a strange way, it was peaceful. At least it was. Until the storm. It happened about a year after I joined the department. Late summer, around 2 o'clock in the morning. A severe thunderstorm rolled through town. Not the kind with a little rain and some thunder. I mean a real storm, the kind that makes the entire world feel hostile. Sheets of rain hammered the roads. Lightning flashed every few seconds. Power outages were being reported all over town. Several roads had already flooded. I had parked my cruiser in a shopping center parking lot near the center of town so I could respond quickly if emergency calls started coming in. For a while, everything was quiet. Then dispatch broke the silence. Unit 14, copy a possible kidnapping report. My hand immediately went to the radio. Go ahead. The dispatcher on duty that night was Claire. She sounded uneasy. That alone got my attention. Claire wasn't the type to get rattled. We received a 911 call from a male subject claiming he was being held captive inside a residence. I sat up straighter. What was the location? She gave me the address. I glanced at the cruiser computer 10 minutes away. I was closest. Before I could answer, Claire continued. The caller disconnected before we could obtain additional information. I keyed the radio. Unit 14 responding. Start another unit. A moment later, another rookie officer named Chris chimed in. I'll back him. Perfect. Chris was one of the few officers I completely trusted. Calm under pressure, sharp instincts, good guy to have beside you. As I pulled onto the road, Claire came back over the radio. There was something different in her voice now. Like she wasn't sure whether she should even say what she was about to say. Unit 14, go ahead. The caller sounded strange. What do you mean? A few seconds passed. Then she said something that made the hair on my arm stand up. It sounded like an adult male attempting to speak like a child. I frowned. What? Specifically, a young girl. Lightning exploded across the sky. For a second, the entire road lit up white. Then darkness returned. Could have been a prank, I asked. I don't think so. Her answer came immediately. That bothered me. Claire listened to emergency calls every night. She was good at spotting nonsense. If anything feels off, proceed carefully. 10-4. The radio went silent. For the next several minutes, all I heard was rain hammering against my windshield. Something about the call felt wrong. Not impossible, just wrong. Kidnapping reports weren't unheard of. But the voice, that detail kept sticking in my head. Why would a grown man sound like a little girl? And why would Claire sound genuinely disturbed by it? The closer I got to the address, the darker things became. The entire neighborhood had lost power. Streetlights were dead. Everything looked abandoned. Only occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the houses. Then I saw Chris. His cruiser sat parked in front of the address. I pulled alongside him. The first thing I noticed was the house. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Overgrown grass, dead bushes covering the windows, missing shingles, sagging roof, rotting siding. If somebody told me the place had been abandoned for 10 years, I would have believed them. Chris leaned toward my window. Place looks great. I laughed. Neither of us actually found it funny. We both knew appearances could mean nothing or everything. I told him I'd take point. He nodded. Together, we stepped into the rain. The storm felt even worse outside. Cold water soaked through my uniform almost instantly. Thunder rumbled overhead. We followed a muddy path toward the front door. Every step felt heavier than it should have. Like some instinct was trying to tell me not to go any farther. When we reached the porch, I rang the doorbell. Nothing then. Footsteps. Slow footsteps approaching from inside. They stopped on the opposite side of the door. Silence. Whoever was standing there wasn't opening it, wasn't speaking, just standing there watching. A strange feeling crawled into my stomach. I glanced toward the peephole at that exact moment. A shadow shifted away from it. Someone had been looking directly at us. If you are in there, police department. Open the door. Nothing. Several more seconds passed. Then, click. The lock turned. The door slowly creaked open, only a few inches. A face appeared in the darkness. The man looked to be in his early 30s, heavy-set, balding. Thick glasses, pale skin, and nervous. Very nervous. The moment I saw his eyes, I knew something was wrong. Not because he looked guilty, because he looked terrified. Like he was afraid we'd find something or someone. I explained the reason for our visit, the alleged kidnapping call. The man's reaction was immediate confusion, or at least an attempt at confusion, a kidnapping. He laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. I asked him about the call. He claimed it was probably a pocket dial. Then I asked him about the voice for just a second. His eyes shifted away, only a second. But I caught it. And so did Chris. I don't know anything about that. Lie, maybe not a big lie, but definitely a lie. I asked if anyone else was inside. Number, he answered too quickly. I live alone. Then I told him we needed to come inside. His face changed instantly. Not without a warrant. That response surprised me. Most innocent people cooperate. This guy immediately went legal, which was his right. but it made me even more suspicious. I stepped away and contacted dispatch. 5 minutes later, we had a telephonic warrant approved. When I showed him the warrant, his hands started shaking. And that is when I knew whatever was happening inside that house, we were about to find it. The moment the homeowner stepped aside and allowed us inside, a foul odor hit me. Not the smell of a dead animal, not sewage, something worse. The kind of smell that develops when a person stops caring about the world around them. Rotting food, mold, filth, neglect. I instinctively wrinkled my nose. My flashlight swept across the room. What I saw immediately raised red flags. The living room looked like a landfill. Stacks of dirty dishes covered nearly every surface. Clothes were piled shoulder high in corners. Empty food containers littered the floor. Cockroaches scattered across the carpet whenever the flashlight beam touched them. A stained couch sat crooked against one wall. The entire place felt wrong, not just dirty. Wrong. The homeowner stood behind us nervously, watching every movement, every step, every glance. Every second that passed seemed to make him more uncomfortable. Chris noticed it too. I could tell by the way he kept glancing at the guy. Something wasn't adding up. Then my foot bumped into something. I looked down. A toy. A pink Barbie playhouse. For a moment I froze, because I recognized it. My daughter had received the exact same toy for Christmas the year before. I aimed my flashlight around. More toys, dolls, plastic tea sets, stuffed animals, children's books. I slowly turned toward the homeowner. You have kids? He hesitated, then shook his head. Number? Then why all the toys? He forced a smile. My nieces visit sometimes. The answer sounded rehearsed. And honestly, the house wasn't fit for children. No responsible parent would allow kids inside a place like this. Not for 5 minutes, not for 1 minute. Chris and I exchanged a quick look. Neither of us believed him. I gave him one final opportunity. Is there anyone else in this house? Number? The answer came even faster this time. Too fast. Like he'd practiced it. I started down the hallway. Immediately he became agitated. There is nothing down there. I ignored him. Officer, seriously, there's nothing down there. Chris stepped in front of him. Stay where you are. The homeowner opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. His eyes never left me, not once. I continued down the hallway. The first room on the left was partially open. I pushed the door wider. Children's toys covered the floor. Diapers, coloring books, stuffed animals. And in the far corner, a person. My heart nearly stopped. I instantly drew my weapon. The beam of my flashlight locked onto the figure. Then reality caught up with me. It wasn't a person. It was a doll. A life-size doll, sitting in a rocking chair, its head tilted downward, its long hair hanging over its face. For several seconds, I just stared at it, trying to process what I was seeing. The doll was dressed in women's clothing, and it wasn't alone. The bed beside it was covered with neatly folded blouses. Jeans, brass, lingerie, every item carefully arranged by color, everything organized with obsessive precision, which made absolutely no sense. The rest of the house was disgusting, yet this room looked maintained, protected, almost respected. A chill crawled up my spine. I stepped back into the hallway. Everything good? Chris asked. I looked at him. Yeah, but honestly, nothing about that room felt good. Nothing about it felt normal. I continued forward. The second bedroom was empty, completely empty, which left only one place. The door at the end of the hallway, the basement. The homeowner immediately spoke again. You should check upstairs first. I stopped, turned, looked directly at him. His face had gone pale. I'll get to it. There isn't anything down there. Then you won't mind if I look. He didn't answer. That told me everything. I reached for the doorknob. The homeowner suddenly started apologizing over and over. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. My stomach tightened. I slowly opened the door. A set of wooden stairs disappeared into darkness. Complete darkness. The smell coming from below was even worse. I clicked my flashlight toward the bottom. Boxes, old furniture, junk. Nothing unusual. Then, rattle. The sound echoed from somewhere deeper inside the basement. I froze. There it was again, rattle. Metal against metal movement. Someone was down there. My pulse immediately accelerated. I looked over my shoulder. The homeowner had tears in his eyes. Actual tears. And he kept apologizing. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. The sound coming from the basement continued. Rattle, rattle, rattle. I drew my weapon. Chris did the same. Then we started down. Every step creaked. The deeper we went, the louder the rattling became. By the time I reached the bottom, I could hear breathing. Someone was breathing, somewhere nearby. I swept my flashlight across the room. Boxes, shelves, broken furniture. Then I saw another door. The rattling was coming from behind it. I pointed toward the door. Chris nodded. My mouth felt dry. Years later, I can still remember the feeling. That certainty that whatever was behind that door was going to change everything. I approached carefully, weapon raised, heart pounding. Police department. The rattling stopped instantly. Silence. Come out with your hands up. Nothing, no response, no movement. I repeated the command, still nothing. I positioned myself beside the doorframe, the safest angle possible. If someone fired through the door, I wouldn't be standing directly in front of it. Then I grabbed the handle, twisted and pulled. The door swung open. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then reality hit me all at once. A man, a living human being inside the room, terrified, broken, barely recognizable as a person. He wasn't a suspect, he wasn't hiding, he was trapped, for 2 years, 2 entire years. The man had vanished from the community years earlier. Everyone thought he was dead. His family thought he was dead. His friends thought he was dead. The town thought he was dead. But he wasn't. He had been imprisoned beneath that house the entire time. The homeowner had taken everything from him. His freedom, his family, his life, and somehow, he survived. The truth came out slowly afterward. Earlier that evening, the homeowner had brought food downstairs. For the first time in years, he accidentally left his phone behind. The victim managed to reach it, activated Siri, and called 911. That was the call Claire received, the one that sounded wrong, the one that sounded like a little girl. The one that started everything. When officers arrived, the homeowner panicked and restrained the victim again, preventing him from making noise, preventing him from calling out, which explained why he never responded when I shouted commands. He wasn't refusing to cooperate. He was terrified. Terrified that if he moved suddenly, I would mistake him for a threat and shoot him. When we brought him out of that basement, I remember watching him look up at the rain. He stood there for several seconds, just staring into the storm, like he couldn't believe it was real, like he'd forgotten what freedom felt like. The homeowner was arrested immediately. The victim was rushed to the hospital and eventually reunited with his family. Most officers would consider that a success story, a happy ending, and maybe it was. But one detail has haunted me ever since. The voice. That childlike voice. The victim was a grown man, a father, a respected member of the community. Yet when he finally got the chance to call for help, he sounded like a little girl. I still think about that, because if someone can be controlled so completely for so long that they forget how they used to speak, then what else happened inside that house? What else was taken from him? And what kind of monster spends years turning another human being into someone they no longer recognize? To this day, that is the question that keeps me awake. By the time you spent several years working patrol, most calls stop affecting you. You learn how to separate yourself from the job. You respond. You handle the situation. You write the report. Then you move on to the next call. At least that is what most officers try to do, because if you carried every disturbing thing home with you, you'd never sleep again. I've been a patrol officer for over 8 years. Most of that time was spent working nights. I've handled domestic disputes, overdoses, fatal crashes, burglaries, violent assaults, more than I can count. But every once in a while, a call comes along that refuses to leave you. This was one of those calls. It happened several years ago during late October, around 2:40 a.m. in the morning. The kind of night where everything feels slightly off. The streets were empty. The air was cold, a light rain drifted through town. Not enough to cause problems, just enough to make the pavement glisten beneath the streetlights. I was finishing paperwork in my cruiser when dispatch toned me out. 911 hang-up, possible disturbance. Pretty routine, at first. Then dispatch provided additional information. A neighbor had called after hearing a woman screaming for help inside the house next door. The screaming had stopped before the caller dialed 911. But she was certain of what she'd heard. Someone had been screaming loudly, desperately, for help. The address belonged to a quiet residential neighborhood, single-family homes, well-kept lawns. The kind of place where nothing interesting ever seemed to happen. I acknowledged the call and headed that way. 5 minutes later, I arrived. The street was completely silent. No people outside, no vehicles moving, no lights visible inside the home. Everything looked normal, too normal. I parked several houses away and approached on foot. As I got closer, I noticed something immediately. The front door was partially open, just a few inches. Enough to see darkness inside. My hand instinctively moved toward my radio. Dispatch, I am on scene. Front door standing open. I requested backup. Unfortunately, the nearest available unit was nearly 10 minutes away. That meant I was alone. The rain lightly tapped against my uniform as I stepped onto the porch. I listened. Nothing. No voices, no movement, no television, no music, just silence. I knocked against the doorframe. Police department. No answer. I knocked again, louder, still nothing. With a report of screaming and an open door, I had legal grounds to enter, so I pushed the door open. Slowly, the living room sat directly ahead. Everything appeared normal. Furniture neatly arranged. No signs of forced entry. No obvious signs of a struggle. No overturned furniture. Nothing. I swept the room with my flashlight. Clear, then I moved toward the kitchen again. Normal. Clean countertops. A sink containing dishes. A glass of water sitting on the table. That detail stuck with me because it suggested someone had been there recently, maybe minutes earlier. I called out again. Police department. If anyone's here, let me know. My own voice sounded unnaturally loud. Still no response. The silence felt wrong. The entire house felt wrong. I moved down a hallway near the rear of the home. Bathroom on the right. Guest room on the left. Both clear. At the end stood a staircase leading upstairs. As I placed my foot on the first step, I heard something. A faint shuffle. Above me, like a foot dragging across carpet, I froze. Listened. Nothing. I drew my weapon. Then began climbing. One slow step at a time. The upstairs hallway contained 3 doors. 2 closed. One partially open. The open door sat at the very end. Then I heard the sound again. A subtle movement. Coming from that room. My pulse accelerated. Police department, silence. Show me your hands. Nothing. I approached carefully. Every instinct told me someone was inside. I reached the doorway. Pushed it open. The room was a master bedroom. The bed looked disturbed. Sheets hanging off one side. A lamp lay knocked over beside the nightstand. Finally, something that didn't belong. I searched the room. Closet empty, under the bed, empty window. Locked. No sign of anyone. No way in, no way out. Yet moments earlier, I'd heard movement. I moved to the second bedroom. A child's room, toys scattered across the floor. Posters on the walls completely empty. Only one room remained. The bathroom. As I approached, something caught my eye. A dark stain on the carpet. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then my flashlight angle changed. My stomach dropped. Blood. Fresh blood. Not a massive amount. But enough. Enough to know somebody had been injured. I crouched beside it. Touched it with my glove. Definitely blood. Immediately, I radioed dispatch. My backup was still several minutes away. I opened the bathroom door. The light clicked on. The shower curtain was closed. Blood streaks covered portions of the tile floor, leading toward the tub. I stepped forward, grabbed the curtain, and yanked it open. Empty, no victim, no suspect, nothing. Yet more blood sat near the drain, as if someone had been standing there bleeding. I searched every inch of the bathroom. Nothing, no body, no explanation. Just blood and silence. The kind of silence that slowly gets inside your head. I searched the upstairs again, more carefully, more slowly. Still nothing. Then I heard it. A creak from downstairs. I immediately turned toward the staircase. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness below. Nothing moved. But I felt it. That unmistakable sensation. The feeling that someone is watching you. Every officer knows it. Sometimes you are wrong. Sometimes you are not. I started downstairs slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. When I reached the first floor, I cleared the living room again, then the kitchen, still empty, but something had changed. Near the refrigerator was a door I'd barely noticed earlier. I had assumed it was a pantry. Now it stood slightly open. I was almost certain it had been closed before. A cold sensation ran through me. I approached, opened it wider, and immediately saw stairs descending into darkness. A basement. I found the light switch, flipped it. Nothing. No lights, no visibility, only darkness. I radioed dispatch. Then started down. The basement smelled damp. Concrete floors, exposed beams, stacks of boxes. The deeper I went, the more uneasy I became. Then my flashlight landed on something. A chair positioned in the center of the room. A metal, folding chair. Underneath it, a massive pool of blood, far more than what I'd seen upstairs. Zip ties dangled from the armrests. Cut, not broken. Cut. My heart started hammering. Someone had been restrained there. Recently, then movement exploded in the corner of my vision. A figure, human, standing near stacks of boxes. The second my flashlight hit them, they ran. Paulus, stop. The figure sprinted deeper into the basement. I chased, boxes crashed over. Furniture shifted, the suspect moved fast, toward the rear wall, toward a small basement window. Then, crash, glass shattered, the figure disappeared. By the time I reached the window, they were already outside. I climbed through after them, cutting my hand on broken glass. The rain hit my face instantly. Ahead of me, a dark silhouette sprinted toward the alley. I took off running. For several seconds, I actually thought I'd catch them. Then they turned a corner and vanished, gone, like they knew exactly where to run. Backup arrived minutes later. K9 units responded. Detectives responded. A perimeter was established. The entire area was searched. Nothing. Nobody found the suspect. Not that night. Not ever. The investigation that followed only made things stranger. The home belonged to a man who lived alone. His wallet was upstairs. His phone remained on the kitchen counter. His vehicle was still parked nearby. The blood throughout the house belonged to him. But there wasn't enough blood to conclusively prove he died. Just enough to suggest something terrible happened. The zip ties, the chair, the blood, everything pointed toward captivity. Yet the victim was missing, completely missing. No body, no witnesses, no answers. And then there was the scream, the original reason police responded. The neighbor remained adamant. She heard a woman screaming, not a man. A woman, yet investigators never identified any woman connected to the property. No girlfriend, no wife, no female resident. Nobody to this day, nobody knows who she heard or what she heard. Maybe I interrupted a kidnapping. Maybe I interrupted a murder. Maybe I arrived just moments too late. I don't know. What I do know is this: had that person not accidentally knocked over those boxes in the basement, I might have left believing the call was nothing, a false alarm, just another strange night. Instead, I walked into one of the most disturbing cases of my career. The missing man's case remains open. Every now and then, I still drive past that house. A new family lives there now. Kids ride bicycles in the driveway. Neighbors mow their lawns. Everything looks normal, completely normal. But every time I pass it, I remember the blood, the chair, the scream, and the man who vanished without a trace. Sometimes the most terrifying things don't happen in abandoned buildings. They happen in ordinary homes, on ordinary streets, hidden behind ordinary doors. 3 officers, 3 different nights, 3 calls they'll never forget. A K9 that refused to enter a room. A man rescued from a nightmare after 2 years in captivity. And a missing person case that remains unsolved to this day. Most people think horror lives in haunted houses, abandoned hospitals, or dark forests. But the truth is often much worse, because real horror happens in places that look completely normal: the house next door, the street you drive down every day, the neighborhood where children play. And sometimes, the scariest part isn't what police find. It is what they never find. Which story disturbed you the most? Story 1, the K9 and the shadow figure. Story 2, the basement captive. Story 3, the missing man. Let me know down in the comments. And if you've ever experienced something strange, unexplained, or truly terrifying, share your story below. Story submissions: CTA have a true horror story you'd like featured in a future video. Send it to lifeisenjoy16@gmail.com. Include as much detail as possible. Your story may be featured in an upcoming episode. If you enjoy true police horror stories, unsolved mysteries, and real-life nightmares, make sure to subscribe. New terrifying stories are uploaded every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss the next one. Before you go, remember this: every year, thousands of emergency calls are made that never receive a full explanation. Most are eventually forgotten, but some remain buried in police reports. Unsolved, unanswered, waiting. And somewhere tonight, an officer is responding to a call they'll spend the rest of their life trying to understand.